a woman unexpectedly learns that she is the reincarnation of royal blood and must govern a vast interstellar empire. She faces tough choices as she tries to protect her family and Earth.
You're the mother.
At the beginning of the film, the protagonist recounts the story of her birth. Her parents met at St. Petersburg University, where her father taught astrophysics and her mother taught applied mathematics. Her mother met and fell in love with her father by the Neva River, where he was studying the stars while nearly freezing to death. His name was Maximilian Jones, and he was the son of an English diplomat. Eventually, her mother became pregnant. One evening, as Maximilian was spending time with his wife, he decided that their daughter would be named Jupiter, after one of the planets. Her mother objected and jokingly said that he could only name the child that if she were dead. Their idyllic life was disrupted by robbers who broke in, stole everything valuable, and killed the father. Fearing for her safety, the mother decided to leave the country with her sister Nina. On a ship, in a container in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, she gave birth to a girl. Upon arriving in America, Jupiter and her family work as cleaners, scrubbing toilets and tidying up apartments. On a distant planet, Xalander, a young man and a woman walk through the deserted streets of a city, discussing the harvest. They are joined by another man, Balaam, who has appeared out of thin air. The three of them belong to the Abrasax family. Each of the siblings controls different planets. Their deceased mother admired a planet called Earth in her writings. By inheritance, Earth rightfully belongs to Balaam, but Tychicus is so impressed by the description that he would be willing to have his brother give it up. Balaam does not respond to this offer and, after saying goodbye to Tychicus and Kalik, disappears. On Earth, Jupiter's alarm clock rings, waking her up as her aunt and mother get ready for work. Reluctantly, she gets up and goes back to cleaning wealthy homes. At night, a group of people on a rooftop discovers a hunter, a lycanthrope, and former legionnaire from the Airborne Corps. One of the men tells the others that this hunter is a legend who tracks people by a single gene. He is a serious threat to them because he hunts their target. The hunter, unaware of being followed, sneaks into a building and finds the information he needs. As he leaves the building, he is immediately attacked by a group of other hunters. Using flying boots and a force shield, he manages to escape. The hunters, realizing they have encountered the legendary hunter, decide to report this to Balaam. At this moment, Kalik is discussing her plans with her advisor. She asks whether she can trust the hunters and requests that her actions remain unknown to her brothers. Balaam arrives at a base in a gas cloud, where his entourage informs him that they have found a recursion. They have traced her genes and know her name, Catherine Danelvia. Balaam gives the order to kill the girl. Meanwhile, Jupiter is cleaning a wealthy client's house. The client asks for help choosing an outfit for a date. Suddenly, Jupiter hears strange noises. Peeking out from the closet, she sees some strange creatures attacking the woman. She grabs her phone to take a picture of them, but the ringing phone gives away her position. The creatures disappear, and Jupiter and the client have no memory of what happened. In the evening, Jupiter has dinner with her family and decides to ask for a loan to buy something for herself. When they refuse, a brief argument breaks out between the women. After dinner, she sits at her computer and browses for telescopes online. Her cousin arrives and suggests she could sell her egg to make a lot of money. After thinking it over, she agrees for the sake of the telescope. At the clinic, Jupiter waits for her turn. Unlocking her phone, she finds a strange photo of unfamiliar creatures, but she doesn't know where it came from. A nurse, Catherine Dunleavy, interrupts her thoughts, saying the doctor is ready. A team of doctors and nurses gathers around Jupiter, who is lying on the operating table. Suddenly, she feels uneasy and decides to halt the procedure. However, no one allows her to do so. She panics in terror as the doctors lift her above the chair and take a sample of her genes. Confirming she is the one they need, the doctor orders her to be killed. At that moment, a hunter bursts into the operating room. The doctors instantly transform into terrifying creatures and engage in a battle with the man. After fighting off the intruders, Cain takes Jupiter and escapes to a safe place. On the spaceship, Titus is entertaining himself with women. Famulus arrives with news that Mr. Cain Wise has found Jupiter. Delighted by the news, the Lord orders transport to be sent for them. Meanwhile, Jupiter regains consciousness, having slept for nearly 12 hours. Cain tells her that Earth is not the only habitable planet and that he himself is a genetically modified human with DNA fused with a wolf-like creature. He is a lycanthrope, a being created for war. The creatures from the clinic are watchers, reprogrammed into monitors and guards. She needs to come with him. However, Jupiter doesn't want to go, not understanding why they want to kill her. She's just an ordinary girl. But the hunter insists she has no choice. If she returns home, they will try to kill her again. A subordinate reports to Balaam about the failure at the clinic. The man is disappointed and orders all ships approaching the planet to be destroyed. Cain shows Jupiter his flying boots and explains how they work, but she isn't ready to trust him and step out of a window on the 100th floor. So the hunter simply picks her up and jumps out the window. They immediately shoot up, and a ship is waiting for them. However, their plans are thwarted when they are attacked by Watchers. Desperately avoiding gunfire and pursuit, Kane tries to keep them safe. During the next attack, he manages to capture an enemy fighter. Taking control of the ship, he continues to dodge attacks and pursuit. While some fighters are destroyed, one is heading straight for them. Realizing he can't avoid the collision, Kane takes the ship slightly downward and rams the enemy. At the last moment, he pulls Jupiter from the falling ship, and they land in the middle of the street. Looking around, she sees that during the battle, the invaders have destroyed half the city. The next day, Jupiter and Kane are driving in a car. Jupiter demands an explanation for everything that has happened. Kane starts telling her about the Abrasax family, but Jupiter doesn't care who they are. They have no right to destroy cities like that. Kane responded that the damage will be repaired by the end of the day. However, Jupiter doesn't believe it's possible. Looking out the car window, she sees buildings quickly being rebuilt. People who witness the battle will have their memories and phones erased. Even if some people are missed, the rest won't believe their stories. Kane explains that he was hired by Titus to find her and also tells her about Balaam, who owns Earth and apparently wants her dead. Meanwhile, Balaam is watching footage from the clinic. He demands an explanation from his servants on how one hunter managed to wipe out an entire team. Mr. Skalikan promises it won't happen again. Jupiter and Kane leave the city. On the way, Jupiter notices that Kane is injured, so she takes a pad from the glove compartment and applies it to his wound. She asks about Titus and why he hired the hunter, but Kane is not taking her to Titus now. When they arrive at a house, Jupiter asks who they're visiting. Kane replies that it's his former friend, who works for the Aegis, a kind of space police. As soon as Kane approaches the door and knocks, it opens immediately, and a man steps out, aiming a weapon at Kane. Stinger immediately punches the hunter in the face. During the fight, Kane explains that Titus sent him to find Jupiter, but Stinger is not interested and continues to beat Kane. At one point, Jupiter is surrounded by bees. However, they don't sting her, they obey and submit to her. Stinger immediately recognizes her as royalty. Upon entering the house, the man tends to Kane's wounds and explains to Jupiter that she has royal blood. Their conversation is interrupted by a phone call. Jupiter's cousin is on the line, and she tells him that the procedure was a failure. The man panics, as he has already spent all his money. Returning to the room, Jupiter learns that the planet is surrounded and they'll have to wait for Etus. Realizing they won't be able to hold out for long, Kane heads to the armory for weapons. Meanwhile, Stinger tells Jupiter about the hunter's fate. He was the best soldier in the Legion but was court-martialed and had his wings taken away after attacking a Tichys-led individual and tearing out his larynx. He was nearly destroyed for this, but Stinger took all the blame. As a result, Stinger was also expelled and lost his wings. While they're talking, Kane picks up on some sounds. Watchers and other hunters are approaching the house from different directions. Returning to his friends, Kane warns them that they have visitors. A fight breaks out, with Kane fighting off the intruders in the house, while Jupiter and Stinger escape outside. Almost immediately, Jupiter is knocked out by a hunter, leaving her alone. Summoning bees to attack one of the mercenaries, she tries to hide in a cornfield. However, she is quickly found and stunned by a stun shot. As she loses consciousness, the Watchers surround her, but they are soon shot at from above. The hunters, clearing the area, take Jupiter onto their ship. Meanwhile, Kane manages to deal with all the opponents. Running outside, he sees Jupiter being lifted onto the ship. Racing at full speed, he manages to board the ship before it takes off. Lord Balaam, at his base, orders Mr. Knight to calculate the cost and precise forecast for the early harvest. They enter a massive hall with a transparent floor. Through the glass, dozens of people can be seen undergoing various robotic procedures. Hearing from a servant that the potion is turning out very well and that the harvest profits by the end of the century will leave all competitors far behind, Balaam orders the harvest to begin the next day before the recursion takes the planet from him. Meanwhile, the hunters have transported Jupiter to another planet. Kane, detaching from the ship, goes on reconnaissance. Jupiter regains consciousness in a room, now dressed in a fancy gown. A servant informs her that she is in the home of the second heir of the Abrasax family. Kalik enters the room, and she is struck by how much Jupiter resembles her mother. Taking her to a statue, Jupiter sees the striking resemblance and learns that she is the reincarnation of her mother. Standing by the statue, Jupiter discovers that Kalik is 14,000 years old and her mother was killed at the age of 90,000. Kalik invites her to follow and explore the possibilities of her new life. In one of the rooms, Kalik enters a pool. Submerging herself completely, she emerges looking significantly younger. Jupiter is astonished by what she sees. Kalik explains that the cells of the body have a shelf life, and they have learned to replace them. They grow the material on various planets, not just Earth. Kane finds Jupiter and engages in a fight with the guards. Meanwhile, Kalik tells Jupiter that she has the right to claim ownership of Earth and just needs to assert her claim to the title. Their conversation is interrupted by Kane and the guards arriving. Jupiter stops the imminent fight, as Kalik is on their side. A nearby advisor informs them that the Aegis are approaching. Lady Kalik agrees to let them take her to where she needs to go, although she had planned to do it herself. Upon boarding the Aegis ship, Jupiter meets Stinger. The cruiser captain, Dhyamika Singh, informs her that they will escort her to the Commonwealth chamber on oars. Kane enters Jupiter's room, and during their conversation, Jupiter shows him that she cares about him, but he maintains distance between them. Upon arriving on oars, Jupiter navigates through bureaucratic red tape to restore her claim to the throne. With the help of her lawyer, Bob, she successfully reinstates her rights. She receives a set of rules and privileges, as well as an order for a royal guard to be assigned. Exhausted from all the paperwork, Jupiter tries to get Kane to admit why he's still helping her, since he has already fulfilled his obligations to Titus. Kane explains that it's because of Stinger. He believes that if they help her, she might help them return to the Legion. At that moment, Stinger and Titus's soldiers appear behind them. They surround their friends, and Stinger apologizes to Kane. They are taken to Titus's spaceship. Upon arrival, Jupiter is greeted by Lord Titus himself, who invites her to dinner. Kane is sent to prison. After changing into a dress, Jupiter attends the dinner. During the meal, Titus informs her that the hunter has violated their agreement, which means he must be sent to the Deadlands. Titus also reveals that he was very close to his mother and knows Jupiter better than she might think. He claims to be very different from his siblings, who only think about their own gain. Titus invites her to follow him. In one of the rooms, he tells Jupiter about a highly valuable substance. It's the same kind that Khalik bathed in. To make one capsule, 100 human beings are required. Planets like Earth are essentially farms where people are deliberately grown. Jupiter is horrified by this revelation. Seeing her distress, Titus explains that his mother had tried to end this business before she was killed. He supports her stance and proposes marriage to her. Stinger contacts Titus's ship, asking for Kane to be left alone, but he is informed that the hunter will be fed to the void for his betrayal. Once the communication ends, Captain Dhyamika orders Stinger to be locked in a cell. The cruiser then departs for the coordinates where Kane is held. Kane is brought before Titus. Titus announces his claim to Earth and his plans to marry Jupiter. In the event of her death, all rights to the planet would pass to him. As Titus discusses Kane's fate, Kane surveys the surroundings. When he is ejected into space, he manages to kick off his spacesuit. Once in the void, the suit activates automatically. A computer voice announces that there is 37 minutes of oxygen remaining. On Earth, Jupiter's family learns that her cousin practically forced her to sell her egg for money. The relatives are outraged by his actions. Suddenly, the apartment begins to shake, and terrifying creatures burst in, searching for Jupiter's mother. Kane, still in space, hears the computer voice announce that the oxygen supply is depleted. As he lapses into semi-consciousness, he notices a portal opening. Kane regains consciousness aboard the Aegis cruiser. Meanwhile, Jupiter realizes she cannot accept Titus's proposal, even though he insists it is a contract to protect the people. Doubting his intentions, she asks to see Kane, but Titus informs her that Kane attacked a servant and incapacitated the guards, so he has been handed over to the authorities. Titus had not mentioned this earlier because he first intended to present her with documents for Kane's and Stinger's pardon and reinstatement. Impressed by his concern for his subjects, Jupiter decides to accept his marriage proposal. On the Aegis cruiser, Kane visits Stinger in his cell. Stinger reveals that there is a bug in his daughter's program, and he lacked the resources for the recoding. He loves his daughter dearly and is willing to do anything for her. Learning about the reasons for Stinger's betrayal, Kane believes that anyone in Stinger's place would have acted the same way and asks for Stinger's release. The Legionnaires begin preparations to rescue Jupiter and put on their flight suits. At the wedding venue, Jupiter arrives for her own wedding. A large crowd is gathered in the vast hall. Stepping onto the floating platform, Jupiter descends gracefully towards Titus. While Titus waits for his bride, Famulus reports that the Aegis are in orbit and requests landing. Lord Titus orders that they be kept out by any means necessary. The guards immediately deploy stormtroopers. As Jupiter steps off the platform, she asks about the people around them. Titus explains that they are standard modules, a necessary part of a royal wedding ceremony. The ceremony begins, with Titus taking the first marriage vow, followed by Jupiter. Meanwhile, Kane and Stinger fight their way through the stormtroopers. Successfully overcoming them, they encounter heavy fire from all weapons but manage to evade it. At the last moment, they burst into the hall and stop the wedding ceremony. Jupiter realizes that everything was a lie, and Kane confirms it. Titus had intended to kill her. He admitted it before ejecting Kane into space. Kane takes Jupiter and returns to the cruiser. Sitting in the room, Jupiter hands Kane their pardons and asks him to take her home quickly. Upon returning to Earth, she enters her house and finds it empty. Instead, she is met by one of Balaam's servants. He informs her that Balaam has an offer. She must go with him and renounce her claim to the throne in exchange for the safety of her family. Kane realizes how dangerous this is and tries to convince Jupiter not to go, but she can't abandon her family and agrees. Balaam's soldiers even agree to let Aegis personnel accompany them. The cruiser follows the ship carrying Jupiter, but suddenly the gates begin to close, and the Aegis are unable to enter. Jupiter is delivered to Balaam. Stinger approaches Kane, noticing his deep concern, and encourages him to save the one he cares about. Cain immediately acts on this advice. Boarding a small ship, he navigates through a gas cloud and breaches the protective glass shield to enter the city. Meanwhile, Lord Balaam pressures Jupiter to renounce her title. If she doesn't comply, her family will suffer. The floor of the chamber becomes transparent, revealing her family's location. Terrified for their lives, she agrees to all of Balaam's demands. Balaam extends a document for her to sign, but at the last moment, she changes her mind. If she relinquishes all rights to Earth, Balaam will immediately commence the harvest, which she cannot accept. Their conversation is interrupted by a servant who rushes in, reporting that the gravic hull is damaged and the gas is reacting. Realizing they have little time, Balaam demands an immediate renunciation, but Cain bursts into the room. After fending off Balaam, Cain orders Jupiter's immediate execution, but Cain saves her at the last moment. He hands Jupiter a gun and tells her to rescue her family while he holds off the guards. Unable to hide her feelings any longer, she kisses Cain before running to her family. On the Aegis cruiser, the situation is assessed as critical with a potential explosion. The city is gradually collapsing. As Cain fights the guards, Jupiter frees her family. Balaam watches her, waiting for the right moment to attack. When she is alone, he strikes, but she shoots him in the leg. The destruction in the city intensifies, and a piece of a column breaks through the floor, causing Jupiter and Balaam to fall into an abyss. Cain witnesses this but is unable to help due to being detained by one of Balaam's soldiers. Jupiter and Balaam manage to grab onto a partially destroyed bridge and climb back to a surviving floor. Meanwhile, Cain continues his battle with the winged guards. After breaking one of their wings, he and the guard plummet downward. The fight resumes after landing, and Cain eventually triumphs. Meanwhile, Jupiter searches for Cain and her family. The Aegis cruiser hovers above the city. Cain manages to contact them and informs them that Jupiter's family is with him, asking them to take the family aboard. Once everyone is safely on board, Cain sets out to find Jupiter. Meanwhile, Jupiter continues her search for her family despite numerous obstacles, but instead encounters Lord Balaam. He attacks her again, and they engage in a fierce fight. During their struggle, Balaam reveals that he fought similarly with his own mother, who hated her life and begged him to kill her. Suddenly, the building they are in collapses, and both Lord Balaam and Jupiter are sent plummeting into a fiery abyss. At this critical moment, Cain finally finds Jupiter. He catches her in midair, lands on a nearby platform, and puts her into a spacesuit. She immediately inquires about her family and learns that they are safe. With time running out and the city on the brink of explosion, the captain orders the portal to be opened. Cain flies towards the ship at maximum speed. As the countdown nears its end, the cruiser begins to enter the portal. With seconds to spare before the explosion, the portal gates close, leaving Cain and Jupiter stranded. Suddenly, sensors detect a signal from Mr. Wise. They receive the signal and hear Cain's voice asking them to look out the window or, better yet, open the airlock to let them aboard. In the nick of time, they manage to pass through the portal with the ship. Jupiter and her family return home. Her relatives have no memory of the recent events and start their day as usual. Jupiter continues with her house chores. During the family dinner, they present her with a gift, a telescope she had always dreamed of. She reveals that she has a date that evening, and her family is thrilled by the news. On the roof, Cain asks Jupiter if she's going to tell her family about owning Earth. Jupiter shakes her head, saying they'd think she's lost it and would probably have her committed to a psychiatric hospital. Cain then spreads out his restored wings and pulls her into a kiss. Afterward, Jupiter takes off into the sky with her flying boots, and Cain follows right behind with his wings. How logical do you think it was to hunt down and track Jupiter? If she hadn't been found or hadn't discovered who she was, things could have turned out very differently.